Queer is a romance film about a man longing for an intimate connection. It might be cryptic for some viewers, but it's definitely interesting if you can piece it together. Let's talk about it. This movie is based on the book by William S. Burroughs. It takes place in the 1950s, where we follow William Lee, played by Daniel Craig. He's an American living in Mexico City, where he frequently goes out partying with other gay expats. He ends up meeting Eugene Allerton, played by Drew Starkey, who he immediately becomes infatuated by. The two of them form a questionable bond that Lee tries to cultivate, eventually leading to them traveling together on behalf of one of Lee's brazen pursuits. So there's definitely some value in knowing a little bit about William S. Burroughs and his story. This movie is based on his unfinished semi-autobiographical novel, with William Lee being based loosely around him and his experiences. If you have 5 to 10 minutes to read his Wikipedia page before seeing this, I would highly suggest doing so, as that knowledge will provide some context around some of the scenes and surrealist imagery. So this movie is a character study. My take on it is that it's about a character defined by his sense of longing. It's not just about longing for a physical connection, but just the concept of longing for more because of the desire to feel something rather than to have something. We follow a guy whose entire self-worth seemingly revolves around filling an empty void in his heart. He doesn't seem to have much independence as he keeps looking outward for stimulation. This speaks to him on more than one level. He's always going out looking for thrills, he abuses substances, and he has a strange obsession with the concept of telepathy. The latter might sound strange, but once you watch the movie, it'll make perfect sense why he has that obsession and how it relates to Eugene. Everything circles back to Lee's longing for connection, and Eugene just happens to be the one who he decides should fill that void. It's interesting because Eugene almost comes off as two-dimensional because of how mysterious he is from both our perspective and from Lee's. For a good chunk of the movie, he doesn't really say much, and we don't really get to know much about who he is or what he's like, making him feel like an enigma. Whatever this relationship he has with Lee is, it's strange because he doesn't really seem to have much agency, nor does he seem to really even care. He just feels like he's riding the wave. I think this speaks to how obsessing over a person or thing is often not reflective of how incredible that thing supposedly is, and more so a reflection of how strange and irrational obsessions often are. Because Eugene, though probably has more layers than I'm giving him credit for, comes off as a vanilla guy, and it begs the question, what does Lee see in him? But he pursues him anyway, which is of course difficult because of the angles he has to take in his romantic endeavors, because of the times. This takes place in the 1950s, which is not a very empowering period in American history for gay people, forcing him to navigate society's judgment. He's very reluctant to communicate very basic things with his romantic prospects, like asking what their sexual orientation is, or communicating his own intentions. This lack of communication really speaks to the theme of longing for feelings. He's foregoing these conversations entirely because of his fear of rejection and judgment. Because those pains are the polar opposite of what he is seeking. These fears stem from the pressure that he has put on himself to have an interpersonal connection with someone. And among these deep-rooted fears, his biggest one seems to be loneliness. His desire for love feels as much like an escape from emptiness as it does a compulsive need to feel something. There's a lot more that I would love to peel back about these characters, but for the sake of avoiding spoilers, I really don't think I should say much more about them. A lot of what this movie has to say about them is communicated not through dialogue, but through their decisions and visual storytelling. For example, rather than Lee solely talking about how he wants to be with Eugene, we also see these faded, trippy visuals of him imagining being more intimate with him. That is only a taste of how deep some of the surrealism in the movie goes. There is a lot of symbolic imagery like this throughout the movie, especially in the last chapter. Some of it is pretty easy to decipher, like the aforementioned example, but some of it is really outlandish when you think about what we're seeing on screen versus what it actually represents. But I mean outlandish like in a good way. So where I think this movie will lose a lot of viewers is with how erratic the dialogue can be. There is a fair amount of it that doesn't really provide narrative value. There's a lot of dialogue where characters are kind of just rambling. That dialogue does indirectly tell us things about those characters, but it doesn't always contribute to furthering the story. The same can be said about some scenes. There are a lot of very brief scenes, some of which are mere seconds long, some of which have little to no dialogue. Again, these tell us things about the characters, but some of them kind of felt redundant and probably could have been cut. I'm reluctant to say that they should be cut because the relevance behind some of them could just be escaping me. But all of that is just to qualify myself to make the claim that the movie, by the time we get to the third chapter, really felt like it was dragging its feet. I kind of want to go off script for a sec because I'm sure somebody is going to try and now throw out the insult of, you just have a TikTok attention span. Just a reminder that I just reviewed The Brutalist last week, which is 3.5 hours long. It's very long, but I loved the movie and plan on going for a second screening once it officially comes out in theaters. That movie occupied its time a little bit better than this one. Because when there are so many lines and several scenes that don't contribute to a cogent narrative, it leaves the viewer hungry for ones that do. There are some big pivotal moments in the movie, but not many, and when there are a lot of moments that just feel like filler, it kind of just leaves you wondering, okay, like, where are we going with this? I guess it's not really a terrible thing though, because the movie is definitely unpredictable and it leads to a fitting conclusion still. It just has some moments that might test your patience. So I saw this movie the day before, but I wrote the script for this video the day that the Golden Globe nominees were announced, with Daniel Craig being nominated for Best Actor in a Drama for this role. He's probably getting the Oscar nom as well because it's a very good performance, and I gotta say that I also really love seeing actors subverting typecasts. Him being able to absolutely crush a role like this after making a name for himself playing one of the biggest womanizers in all of fiction shows us that the dude has some serious range. Luca Guadagnino also flexes some serious directorial range here. A lot of his collaborators for this were some of the same people he worked on Challengers with, but they made something pretty different here. He recruited the same screenwriter, the same cinematographer, and the same composers, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I really loved their use of the clarinet in the score. It was soft and almost mysterious, which really contributed to the movie's cryptic and melancholy vibe. It's a very well-crafted movie overall. As long as you're prepared for a story that meanders quite a bit, there's a lot to enjoy in it. I'd call it a pretty decent movie, but it's probably more for cinephiles and not so much for casual viewers. If you're the type of viewer who loves to peel back the layers of a film, there's a lot to dig into with this one. It is not a movie for minimally engaged viewers or viewers who take things at face value. If that describes you, it is probably not the movie for you. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of Kraven the Hunter.